Mama in jaz sva gledala in pri tem zmrzovala, kako so v luknjo trpali trupla. Vanjo pa so metali tudi drevesa, bolna in rahitična, ter prst, ogromno prsti. Zemljo so metali v zemljo. In pozneje smo izvedeli, da so ljudi metali tja noter, ker so prepovedali pogrebe. Da so ljudje, živeči v bližini pokopališč, pred vrata postavili barikade in jih zakurili, da skoznje ne bi vstopili mrliči, za katere nihče ni vedel, od česa so umrli.
Hvala lepa, sem zelo napeto čakala, kaj bo, potem pa vidim svoje ime, kar je verjetno znak, da lahko povem nekaj besed. Torej, lepo pozdravljeni vsi predstavniki diplomatskega zbora, vsi, ki ste danes tukaj, ljubitelji literature. Pozdravljam vas v imenu Cankarjevega doma, tudi v imenu Barbare Rogelj, ki vodi humanistični in literarni program, pa mojega kolega Damjana Gorenca in drugih sodelavcev. Torej, letošnji festival se sprašuje, kaj nas oblikuje. Seveda nas oblikuje zelo veliko stvari, nekatere puščajo v nas lepe spomine, druge pa rane in brazgotine. Ampak fabula vedno pusti zelo, zelo dober vtis. To je festival, pri katerem Cankarjev dom z velikim veseljem sodeluje že vrsto let in to ne brez razloga. Glavni razlog je ta, da fabula že 22 let zelo pomembno oblikuje slovensko kulturno krajino in pa seveda nas, bralke in bralce, in pušča dolgotrajne sledi, kajti za fabulo ostanejo pomembni prevodi različnih knjig in potem ti prevodi, ko jih preberemo, seveda pustijo v nas globoke sledi. Pa še eno stvar bi poudarila pri fabuli. Zdaj, na svetu je zelo veliko reči, ki niso dostopne vsem, ampak samo privilegiranim izbrancem. Medtem pa se festival Fabula ravno nasprotno trudi že 22 let, da bi bil dostopen čim širšemu krogu ljubiteljev literature. Širi se po Sloveniji, širi se tudi preko slovenskih meja in zagotavlja res kakovosten program za vse. Zato iskrena hvala založbi Beletrina, Mitji Čandru, Alešu Štegru, številnim sodelavcem za to res dobro sodelovanje. Hvala lepa.
Dragi gostiteljici Uršula in Barbara, spoštovane gospe, spoštovani gospodje, izjemno veselje mi je, da sem lahko danes tukaj z vami. Beletrina je seveda založba in knjige so bile od nekdaj, so bile in bodo realni in duhovni temelj našega delovanja. Ob tem pa smo seveda vse skozi gradili tudi projekte in dejavnosti, ki si s knjigami tako ali drugače dopisujejo, so v sorodstvu s knjigami in se nekako oplajajo s knjigami. In prav literarna festivala sta bila ena prvih takih projektov in sta še vedno z nami kot pravzaprav najstarejša projekta založbe. Prvega je Aleš Šteger ustanovil skupaj z nekaterimi drugimi že takoj v istem letu, v letu 96, ko je Beletrina nastala. To so bili seveda in so še vedno dnevi poezije in vina, ki so se vmes preselili iz Goriških Brd na Ptuj. Že nekaj let zatem, čeprav je tisti, ki smo na založbi že dolgo dojemamo kot nekakšno mlajšo sestro, pa verjetno iz vidika mlajših sodelavk in sodelavcev fabula ni tako zelo mlada, je pa nastala fabula. Fabula je nastala z namenom, da bi v Ljubljano in v Slovenijo pripeljali res velika imena svetovne literature, tukaj mislim svetovno prozo, in ne samo, da bi dali nekaj blišča tem gostovanjem, ampak da bi dejansko poskusili privabiti najrelevantnejša imena in s tem tudi spodbuditi res širše zanimanje za literaturo. Ob tem pa nikoli ni šlo samo za zvezdne trenutke, ampak je seveda šlo tudi za to, da smo skušali s festivalom odgovarjati na vsakokrat nove potrebe skupnosti, izumljati nove oblike predstavljanja literature in ne nazadnje interakcije literature z drugimi žanri in si nasploh zastavljati vprašanja, ki so v nekem trenutku ključna za naše bivanje. Fabula je tako vselej znova tudi prostor inovacij in taka bo ostala tudi v prihodnosti, ne glede na kraje in čase, v katerih se bo dogajala. Dovolite mi, da se najprej zahvalim vsem podpornicam in podpornikom, tako institucijam, podjetjem, kot seveda vsem vam, ki svojim obiskom podpirate prostor duhovne in umetniške svobode. V prvi vrsti pa naj se zahvalim vsem sodelavkam in sodelavcem, Aljažu in vsem drugim, ne samo tistim, ki prispevate tako ali drugače k festivalu Fabula, ampak vsem tistim, ki prispevate k temu, da je delo na Beletrini res privilegij v najboljšem pomenu besede. Hvala lepa.
Hvala Uršula, hvala Mitja. Tudi z moje strani dobro večer, spoštovani gostje. Med vami tudi gospod veleposlanik in zaposleni na ambasadi Kraljevine Španije, vodje drugih veleposlaništev in tujih kulturnih inštitucij v Sloveniji, predstavniki mestne občine Ljubljana in partnerskih organizacij, ljubiteljice, ljubitelji literature. Dobrodošli na otvoritvi Festivala literature sveta Fabula, njegove letošnje 21. edicije, ki nosi slogan Kar nas oblikuje. Slogan, ki v sebi nosi izjavo festivalske zavezanosti k sodelovanju v sodobnih diskurzih, ki oblikujejo naše razumevanje človeške identitete, je razmislek o neštevilnih dejavnikih, zgodovinskih, kulturnih, političnih in globoko osebnih, ki oblikujejo naše zaznavanje, dojemanje in vplivajo tudi na naše medsebojne odnose. Letošnji festival prihaja v kritičnem obdobju naše zgodovine, ko so družbeni pretresi in konflikti na novo začrtali obrise svetovne politike in medčloveških odnosov. Nedavne pandemije, gospodarske nestabilnosti, politični namiri in podnebne spremembe so razkrili ranljivost našega globaliziranega sveta in poudarili nujnost našega iskanja, globjega pomena in razumevanja. Paradoksalna resničnost našega časa zahteva tudi temeljno preučitev in ponovno oceno vloge literature in umetnosti v naših življenjih. Ne zgolj kot elementa užitka ali pobega, temveč kot ključno orodje za etično in spoznavno sodelovanje s svetom okoli nas. Z izborom letošnjih festivalskih gostov v sklopu srednjega programa literarnih večerov v Cankarjevem domu Marijo Stepanovo, Kapko Kasabovo, Lucijo Folerovo, Mileno Markovič, Pol Guašom, v sklopu Fabule pred Fabulo pa tudi Mirčeja Kartereskujem z zaključnim humanističnim fokusom Fabula v teoriji, v katerem bo nastopil Georgij Gospodinov, slavimo raznolikost glasov, ki v letošnji festivalski ediciji raziskujejo tematiko človeške identitete. Pri tem pa nas s svojimi literarnimi deli ponujajo pogled v univerzalne teme človeških izkušenj, povezujejo kulturne meje in spodbujajo dialog, ki je danes potreben bolj kot kadarkoli prej. Današnji večer sicer odpiramo z vzpenjajočo se literarno zvezdo Pol Guašom, katalonskim avtorjem, ki je tudi avtor fabulinega programa, namenjenega mladim perspektivnim avtorjem, avtoricam in novo ustanovljene mednarodne rezidence Fabula Hub, Balkanska literarna odiseja, ki pod sponzorstvom Evropskega združenja festivalov EFA Fabula skupaj z partnerskima festivaloma na Hrvaškem in Srbijo jo pričenjamo prav za današnjim večerom. V sklopu slednje pa bo avtor nosi Ljubljana, Zagreb, Beograd, se predstavil tudi hrvaškemu in srbskemu občinstvu. Pol Guaš je sicer Slovenijo nazadnje obiskal leta 2018 In prav v našem prostoru tudi zaključeval svoje delo Na palmu srcu, ki ga v različnih oblikah represije odlikuje boj za preživetje in za ljubezen, kar je odlična alegorija današnjega časa. In v veliko veselje mi je, da bo ta odločen in angažiran glas katalonske književnosti gostoval prav na otvoritvenem večeru letošnje Fabule. Večer bo sicer vodila Nina Gostiša, bralsko pa bo večer interpretiral dramski igralec Nejc-Jan Garlati. Slednje ne bi bilo mogoče brez naših podpornikov, partnerjev in koproducentov festivala Cankarjevega doma. Letošnji festival literature sveta Fabula so sicer omogočili Beletrina v koprodukciji s Cankarjevim domom, sofinancer Mestna občina Ljubljana, Javna agencija za knjigo Republike Slovenije in Institut Ramon Llull. Donatorstvo so prispevali Moro in Kunst, zlati sponzor je zavarovalnica Triglav in Petrol, poravnosti sponzor veleposlaništvo Španije v Ljubljani, materialna sponzorstva pa so prispevali pivnica Laibach in podjetje Inozegi. Medijski pokrovitelj je sicer časopis Delo, kjer festivalska priloga izide s jutrišnjim dnem. Rezidenca Fabula Hub, Balkanska literarna odiseja, pa je podprta se strani Evropskega festivalskega sklada za mlade umetnike EFA, pobude Evropskega združenja festivalov EFA in sofinancirana strani Evropske unije, ki je naj omenim našemu festivalskemu programu tudi v letošnjem letu podelila posebno omembno in znak odličnosti. Vsem partnerjem in podpornikom iskrena hvala. Ko se skupaj odpravljamo na precej dolgo pot, Fabula namreč v osrednjem programu ponuja tudi bogat spremljevalni program, namenjen vsem generacijam občinstva, vse od najmlajših, ki jim v sklopu Mlade Fabule ponujamo različne literarne ustvarjalnice, nekoliko starejšim delavnice kreativnega pisanja, do tistih v tretjem življenjskem obdobju, kjer Fabula v sodelovanju z izbranimi domovi za starostnike organizira sobotne bralne matineje. Ob izpostavljanju mednarodnih imen posebno pozornost znotraj Fabulinga izbora namenjamo tudi najboljšim slovenskim literarnim delom. Vse do prvih dni aprila bodo v knjižnicah širom Slovenije tako potekali literarni večeri s slovenskimi literarnimi ustvarjalci. Ob tem pa skrbimo tudi za prenos literature v javni prostor, za inovativne projekte znotraj programa Fabula Polis ter prepletanje literature z drugimi umetnostnimi žanri, kjer sodelujemo z velikim številom slovenskih kulturnih inštitucij in posameznic. Torej bogat program, ki v Ljubljano in Slovenijo prinaša pestro literarno dogajanje vse do 2. aprila. In torej pot, na kateri naj ne pozabimo, da je literatura ogledalo, v kateri se zrcalijo naši pretekli in prihodnji koraki. Zgodbami, ki si jih delimo, pripovedmi, ki jih pletamo in dialogi, ki jih vodimo. Lahko tako ponovno začnemo razumeti spremenljivost naših identitet in sil, ki nas oblikujejo, kar lahko tudi vidimo na festivalski podobi, ki je letošnjo delo Fabuline oblikovalke Tereze Prepadnik. Festival Fabula ni le praznovanje svetovne literature, temveč tudi poziv k ukrepanju. Opomin, da imamo kot globalna skupnost moč preseči delitve in zgraditi mostove medsebojnega razumevanja in empatije. Globoko sem prepričan, da mora literatura delovati kot katalizator dialoga, ki presega nacionalne meje tako avtorjev kot bralcev, z glasovi razuma, izzivacij statusa quo in pripovedovalci zgodb našega časa lahko zatorej upamo, da se bomo zoperstavili silam razkroja in razdora. Ijatov. Naj bo letošnja Fabula vsaj delček v mozaiku upanja, ki priča o trajni moči literature, da nas bliža, navdihne spremembe in osvetli pot k bolj povezanemu in razumevajočemu svetu. Po pogovoru seveda vse vabim na pogostitev v Beletrino pop-up knjigarno na moji levi, kjer najdete prve 3 letošnje Fabuline žepnice, zadnji 2 prispeta v naslednjem tednu, ob tem pa tudi seveda knjižni katalog založbe Beletrina. Ob tem še enkrat osebno hvala vsem mojim sodelavcem in letošnji producentki festivala Evi Kučeri Šmon. Hvala vam za podporo. Torej hvala vsem in dobrodošli na festivalu literature sveta Fabula.
Dober večer, pozdravljeni, and welcome Paul Guask to Ljubljana, to Fabula.
Thank you.
How are you today?
I'm fine. I'm super happy to be here. Yes.
It's been
so
6
excited.
years now, yeah?
Yes. And now I want to see the whole film. Yes, I came to Slovenia in 2018 with some friends. I was 20. We came with an RB traveling from Barcelona. I was the only one driving, one day driving to come here. We went to Bled, to Ljubljana, to different places whose name I don't remember. And I remember I finished my first book ever, which was a book of poetry. I finished it in, what was the name of the lake? Bohinc? Yes. And I finished, like the last line of my first book of poetry, I wrote it there, so it's kind of special to be back. I mean, I couldn't imagine at that moment that I would come back here 6 years later to talk in front of a lot of people about my book. I mean, it's crazy, so I'm very happy, yes.
Well,
Yes.
it's interesting that was your first book ever, but now you are back here presenting your first novel,
Yes,
because you are a poet.
yes, or I don't know. We were talking about that because
Yeah.
I started writing Napalm, which is my first novel, the one we are talking, the one that you can read now if you want. I haven't written any poetry, which is so sad. But I think there is a reason about that. That I think that all the poetry that I could have written, it's in this novel, in this novel, and the other one, which has been just published in Catalonia, the second one, in Catalan. So I think that all the poems that I could have written are somehow inside these novels, in the landscapes, in the pictures that I tried to create, in the characters, in the things that they say to each other. Yeah, I think the poetry is there. So now that I'm done with the novel, maybe I come. Yeah, I started writing some poems. Yeah, so maybe
Really?
I come back. Yeah.
Okay, we will come back to the poetic aspect of this book later, but to go back a bit to finishing your first book in Bohinj, could we say that then Slovenia inspired you, at least in a way?
I mean, yes. Yes, because the last poem is about a lake, so it was about that lake. So it inspired me. I mean, not for these other. It's one thing that I was thinking a lot before coming to Slovenia, then Croatia, and then Serbia, is that a lot of people in Catalonia or in Spain, also in French, where they have already read the novel, a lot of people think that the novel is set somewhere in the Balkans. So, and when I was writing the novel, I was not thinking about the Balkans, because I have only been in Slovenia. But yes, I'm kind of interested to see what people here think about the setting of the novel. But I think that Slovenia is very beautiful, and the landscape of the novel is kind of sad. And for me, Slovenia is a very nice place. I could move perfectly here. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe
you're always
more than 2
welcome.
weeks now. I don't know. Yeah, we will see. Yeah.
You're always welcome. Okay, so you've mentioned the grim landscape of the book, or the grim sentiment of the book. We were talking before this event, and you told me that they asked you at a workshop in Switzerland recently what color you think your language is, and you described it as gray, and that comes from what you call a sentimental landscape from your childhood. Can you share a
Yes.
bit about that?
Yes, well, it was a question that they asked me in this seminar in Switzerland. It was about Romanic languages. So a lot of the languages that were there were kind of small and fragile and, sad languages somehow. But people with little languages, I think that we are very happy people, because we try to survive with the words that we have, and we don't know how much they are going to be here in the world with us, so we try to do something beautiful with them. So they asked me that, and of course I had never asked myself that question before, because you don't go, like, you don't wake up one morning and you ask yourself which is the color of your language. So I think that what I said is that I think that, in fact, the answer, I think that I said the answer is that the color of my language is gray because my like sentimental or my like emotional landscape where I was born, where I grew up, it was kind of it was not yeah, I mean, I could see like the cemetery from my window, and then like a very big highway with lots of cars there, with a lot of noise. And so for me, like to write was a way to escape from my, I would say, from my inner landscape, or from my emotional landscape. Yeah, so in this sense, yeah, this is why I said gray, but maybe today I would say another word, I don't know.
Okay, so you mentioned before that some people thought that Napalm in the Heart is based in the Balkans. I could imagine why that is. So the book sort of throws us into a landscape that has become a militarized zone after an explosion of a mysterious factory. We have the lover of the narrator, whose name we don't know, and who is writing letters to his lover Boris, a Slavic name. And the character, so the protagonist, lives alone with his mother. There is a neighbor called Vita. So they try to survive in this post-apocalyptic world. They also try to find love in this world. And now I would like to ask you, how did you come up with this grim
story,
world there?
with
Because
this dark
you
story.
said somewhere actually that this novel sort of happened to you.
Yeah. I mean, now when you explain it like that, because this is what really happens, it sounds horrible, okay? And it's not. I mean, also beautiful things happen there. Okay, so I will start from the end. Like this, I say that this novel happened to me because I was not planning to write a novel, and I think that the book that you can read now, like, which is kind of a patchwork of different like impressions and thoughts and landscapes and letters, and yeah, it is the result or the consequence of thinking, writing and literature in a very particular way, which is the one that a kind of writing that doesn't want to take part, no, that doesn't want to put the chaos that we live in order, you know. So when I was writing the novel, I was like, okay, I want to create a shape, I want to create kind of an artifact, I want to create like something which somehow can grasp the feeling of how we live life, you know, in a very like chaotic way sometimes, that we don't have like answers for our questions, we don't really know why things happen, you know, we don't really understand why some people live our lives. Sometimes when people are gone, become more present in our lives. So I wanted to show this in the novel, you know. So this is why I say that the novel happened to me, because I started writing one day. I was like, okay, what happens if I describe a landscape in prose and not in poetry? And then the next day I wrote a letter, and then I was thinking about someone sending letters to another person. So I started writing all these letters. So then I saw, okay, there's a story here. So then explore this. And this is how the novel existed somehow. And that was the second question. And the first one, which was, no, there was not. Okay.
No.
So, I know how I came with this story, you know? So I don't really know, because when I start writing, I'm not like, I'm going to talk about this, and this is going to happen, and these two characters are going to fall in love, but then they are going to break up. I don't think about that. So I kind of discover like what's happening with them. I think for me, it's the most like a fair way to play with the characters, you know, that I like when the characters, the writer and the reader are in the same level. So me as a writer, I don't want to like have more power than the reader. And I also like writers that give me the chance to be writer of their novels. I don't know if it makes sense. For example, when I read Clarice Lispector, I have the feeling that I'm writing the novel with her somehow. So that's what I like to do with my writing. What I try to do, at least, of course. I don't say that I'm doing what Clarice Lispector does, of course, but I try to do something like that, you know. So I don't know why this story. I think that I write about things that I don't understand, and I don't like when people say that I write about things that I'm interested to. I mean, what does interest mean? It's something very like, it's not dangerous enough, you know? So I try to write about things that not interest me, but affect me. Things that cause like a pain, or, you know, that are painful to me. And I don't know how. So I also think, like, I love my characters at the end because I have the feeling that with them I can understand more things about myself and about, like, my world, you know. So they are helping me. I'm not creating them. They are helping me to understand, like, some things about myself or about my reality that I don't get or I don't understand. Yeah.
In what way?
Well, in the way that, for me, like, writing is a way of exploring situations that could happen or that have happened, but I haven't lived. Because, for example, Napalm, every single thing that that happens in this novel has happened before, so many times. So this is why I don't like when people talk about this novel as a dystopia or about a post-apocalyptic scenario, because, I mean, I can understand because you don't really know when it's happening and where it's happening, so you're kind of lost as a reader, and you may think that this happens like in the future, but I'm writing about things that we all have lived, or we all have like in our memories, because when we talk about love, when we talk about language, when we talk about like culture, when we talk about war, we are talking about our history. So in the way that, yeah, that I'm exploring things, I'm trying to live things that I haven't lived before, and I'm trying to think how things are going to be in the future with me. So this is, in this way, they help me, I would say, yes.
It's also what we talked about before in the backstage, that so in the novel, much or most things are undetermined, so we do not know exactly when it's happening. We know that there was a past and that there's a possibility for future, but as someone put it, time is floating in this novel. Also, we don't really know much about the characters. For example, Boris, at least to me, exists most of the time only in letters, right? Even if at the end of the book he and the narrator hop on a trip. Yeah, so we talked about the universal aspect of the novel before. So these are the things that we look for, and we try to apply them to the world as we know it. And I think that universally we could apply it to any moment in human history, right?
Yes. I will first say one thing, that Boris, the name, now, okay, it's Slavic, I understand, but I chose Boris because I love Boris Vian, who's a French writer.
Okay.
And because he was so crazy, and he did like so many funny things, and he was like a writer, but he also was an actor, and he also was a musician, and he suffered a lot, and I like him very much, and I love his novels. And I also loved how he died, that he went to see like the adaptation of one of his films, and he was so angry that he didn't like it, that his heart just stopped. So I think it's a good way just like to say goodbye, or to say that you don't like things, you know, you have to be passionate in life. And okay, that was, so it was not Slavic, but I understand that Boris is very Slavic, but that's the story that now, you know, behind his name. And then the other thing was about...
I talked about the
universality. Yeah,
of
I
the
think it's
novel
something
that
very
can be
interesting because
applicable, yeah.
I think you can only reach universality if you don't search it. In the sense that when I was writing this novel and I said, okay, where I want to set this novel, I want this novel to happen in this place. When? In this time. So when I was asking myself this question, and I decided not to set this novel in a particular place or a particular time, it was not searching universality. Like, if I don't say this, then everyone can think that it talks about them. No, what I was trying to do is I was trying to focus in something super, super, super particular. You know, like if I don't talk about the time and I don't talk about the space, then you as a reader and me as a writer, we are only going to focus on the relationship between these characters, you know. We are not going, you know, I like when literature doesn't solve or answer the questions that I have before reading. Mm-hmm. So if I had said Slovenia 1935, you would have like so many answers that you would be like asking yourself things that I don't want to talk about, or you would be like thinking about things that I don't want you to think about. So if I don't focus on this stuff, you're going to feel what they feel. You're going to focus a lot on these relationships and what happens between these characters. So in fact, it was a research or like a way to win a very particular thing, you know. So what happened to these characters have happened so many times before, but it is only happening once to them, you know. So it's something like very particular, something very concrete. And so when you talk about someone in a very deep way, at the end you discover that you are talking about a lot of people, right? But if you want to talk about a lot of people, at the end you don't talk about anyone. So I think that's the answer, yeah.
Okay, I think now would be a good time to invite on stage Nedzian Garalati,
yes,
our actor of Slovenian National Theatre Ljubljana, who will read an excerpt from the book.
Boris, oprosti mi. Prav zares te nisem hotel prizadeti. Bil sem jezen, ker je bil ravno takrat, ko sem ti pisal spodaj v kuhinji in se je pogovarjal z mamo. Njegov von se je dvigal po stopnicah in me dušil. Zato sem ti rekel, da so bili tisti, ki so naredili tisto tvojim staršem, gotovo taki. Vendar tega ne vem. Seveda imaš prav, tega ne vem. Odložil je kapo na mizo, vendar jo je še kar mečkal. Gledal sem ga in si mislil, ne moreš niti za sekundo pustiti svoje usrane kape, da ne bi morda pozabila, koga sva spustila noter. In ko sem šel gor v sobo, mi je drhtelo celo telo, roke in noge, ker nisem mogel verjeti, da sva mu dovolila vstopiti v hišo. In zdaj se spomnim, kako mi je mama rekla, skri se in ne pridi ven. In pokazala na skrinjo, takrat, ko so prvikrat prišli obritoglavci. In minili so tedni in s tedni, meseci in leta od takrat. Danes bi vanjo lahko stlačil le nogo. Zdaj pa so notri. In zdaj vedo, da moja mama ni sama in da jaz obstajam in da nisem otrok. In kaj zdaj, Boris? Kaj zdaj? Zadremal sem in sanjal o tebi. Prišel si v gozd in bila sva skupaj. Nebo je bilo dolgo, umazano in zrnato, barve jajčevca. Bila je tudi svetloba, kot svetlikanje zelenkastega mesa, ki se je širila v pasovih zraka, in glasovi starinske glasbe. Zgolj šibak odmev malo znanega glasu. Zatem sva se znašla na kilometrski plaži, ki jo je pogoltnila neznanska sila. In midva sva bila tam, na sredi, v morju. Nasprotno od drugih sanj so se te iztekle do konca. Brez bolečine so me pripeljale do prebujenja. Ljubil sem te tam, kot sem nekoč davno želel ljubiti v življenju. In to še preden sem poznal imena stvari. Nenadoma sva izginila iz morja in obzorje je bila voda. Vse povsod, zgolj voda. ko sem se zbudil, sem se ponovno spomnil na tistega moškega in obšla me je tesnoba. Da bi se raztresel, sem se uspel na hrib, odkudar sem videl mesto. Kakšna puščava nebotičnikov. Predstavljal sem se te v eni od teh stavb, toda tako dolgo že nisem bil tukaj, da ne vem več, v katerem bloku živiš. Ponovno doma pa se še vedno gibljem kot prej, toda s težo na prsih, ki se je ne morem znebiti. Kajti nenehno razmišljam o očetu, o dedku, o življenju pred tem, o tebi, o tem, kar mi razlagaš in ne razumem. In vse te stvari postanejo preveč zame, veliko preveč, da jih razumem še manj. Prekrije jih sneg neizprosne zime, toda tudi ko posije sonce in usklijejo cvetlice in se sneg stopi, jaz še vedno ničesar ne razumem, Boris. Ničesar ne razumem. Pred smrtjo se je življenje rojevalo vse naokoli. Ribe so se selile po reki navzgor, proti toku. Medved je prebudil iz zimskega spanja in rjovenje se je razlegalo po dolini. Čebele so bile tako polne cvetnega prahu, da bi jih lahko razneslo kot krogle. Življenje se je rojevalo vse naokoli, nato pa se je nenadoma stemnilo. Nad nas je legla noč, jasna in svetlikajoča se noč, ki je z velikansko stekleno kupolo prekrila hiše, kjer smo živeli, in gozd, in tudi mesto na drugi strani hriba. In pod oklepom je svetloba postala tako močna, da nas je oslepila. Kdo bi jo lahko dvignil? Pobočje hriba na tisti strani, ki se je iz hiše ne vidi, so odrezali in tam izkopali luknje, globoke kot žrela, v katere so metali trupla. Moški, od nog do glave oblečeni v belo, so tja noter metali trupla in še več trupel. In poleg so postavili nekakšne drogove z zastavami, velikimi skoraj kot naša hiša, drugo poleg druge, na stotine enakih zastav. Z mamo sva se vzpenjala tja gor, skrivajoč se med drevesi, in od takrat se nisem več vrnil tja, na vrh hribčka. Ogromno mesto tam na drugi strani in polovica oguljenega hriba, odprtega kot črna luknja, ki je goltala krajino. Mama in jaz sva gledala in pri tem zmrzovala, kako so luknjo trpali s trupli. Vanjo pa so metali tudi drevesa, bolna in rahitična, posušena in rdeča, in obleke in hrano ter prst, ogromno prsti. Zemljo so metali v zemljo. In pozneje smo izvedeli, da so ljudi metali tja noter, ker so prepovedali pogrebe, da so ljudje, živeči v bližini pokopališč, pred vrata postavili barikade in jih zakurili, da skoznje ne bi vstopili mrliči, za katere nihče ni vedel, od česa so umrli. Zgodnja jutranja ura. Nebo pritiska na streho. Predstavljam si kita, ki se prekopicava med strešniki in prostor med mojim prsnim košem in njegovim trebuhom. Izgine. Zdaj je kit na meni. Med mojimi bradavicami je njegov ocean. Vstanem. Preskočim vratca ograje na robu vrta, zapah je tako zarjavel, da se ne odpira. Ničesar nisem vzel s seboj, zgolj oblačila na sebi in nožič, ker mi ga je podaril oče in ga vedno nosim s sabo. Stiskam ga s prsti, ko hodim naokoli, da bi me bilo manj strah. Mama mi je nenehno ponavljala, da mi bo nekoč pojasnila, kaj se dogaja v gozdu, ko bom večji in bom to lahko razumel, pa nisem dočakal razlage. Tako zelo sem osredotočen na pot, da ob nepričakovanem šumenju v grmovju dvignem nožek v zrak, kot bi se hotel ubraniti nekoga, ne da bi vedel koga. Tam je bila sova, ki me je strogo gledala. Videl sem se v njenem pogledu, tako nekoristen in nedolžen, z nožkom uperjenim v nekega Boga, da kar zamižim od sramu, ki me preplavi. Tako kot sem bil še majhen, od večera prihajal domov in je bila tam mama utrujena in sem ji jokal, mama, sram me je. Ona pa mi je odgovarjala, otrok. In sem jo pogledal, pričakujoč njen odgovor. Vedno boš čutil sram, toda z njim boš lahko živel samo, če boš znal druge pripraviti do tega, da jih bo sram. Do tega, da bodo sprevideli, da ti svojo sramoto živiš tako, kot bi živel, če bi imel še eno roko, še eno nogo ali pa še eno oko. Kit med bradavicami, njegov ocean.
So I believe this was the first time that you heard it in
Yes.
Slovene. How did it sound for you?
Exciting. And yeah, it sounds good. I don't know what he said. It could be another novel.
Actually, and I have to emphasize that it's quite fascinating that Slovenian is so far one of the rare languages that it has been translated into, but it's been translated into the world's main languages and Slovenian. I find that pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great, because that means that there is like a connection between Catalan and Slovene, which I believe in this connection.
In what way?
I don't know.
Okay, so now we're going to make a slight detour since you've mentioned Catalan, and Nate's really read beautifully this excerpt, but since you've mentioned Catalan, so you come from Catalonia, from Tarragona, and you live in Barcelona, and even if nowadays, as you wrote somewhere, even young Catalan people tend to quickly slip into Spanish. You consciously decided to write in Catalan. Can you talk a bit about
Yeah,
that,
I
your
mean,
thoughts on that?
What happens in Catalonia is that we are like 7.5 million people, approx, but not everyone speaks Catalan. And every day less people speak Catalan. That's what happens when you have a language and a culture, but you don't have like a country or like a government who is promoting this culture, right? It has happened the same with Bretagne in France, for example, or Occitania in France too, that when you speak a language and you have a culture, but there is no one taking care of it, the people who speak it can do a lot, because Catalan has survived so many struggles, has survived wars, has survived a long and painful dictatorship recently, and is still surviving so many, I don't know how to say it in English, like so many like difficulties, let's say it like that, let's put it like that. So, I don't know, for me, like, to speak or to write in Catalan is something like very political, and at the same time it's something very like natural, you know, like I was like not to speak in Catalan, and I think this novel is about this, like when the mother, she writes the letter to the son, she says things like that, and I was not thinking only about me and Catalan, I was thinking about languages and how if you say no to your language, you're saying no to not just like a way to see and to live the world, but in this case, if you say no to your mother tongue, you're saying no to your memory, right? Or to all the things that you have lived. I mean, I am who I am because I was raised by a language that helped me and showed me how the world is. So it is political in the sense that it is political, and I didn't choose to be political. You know what I mean? But I kind of, I don't know how to say it, I kind of moved and transformed something which was casual into a decision, you know, so into a choice. In this sense, it's political, and it's not at the same time. I don't want to say no, like, to my life, to my memories, to my culture, to my language. And this is why I write in Catalan. And at the same time, I write in Catalan because I couldn't do it in another language, you know? Yes.
So would you now please, since you're originally a poet and all the 3 books well, the first 3 books, because you've just got a new second novel out, have been awarded. The first poetry book, the second poetry book, and Napalm in the Heart. You said that you still know some poems in Catalan by heart, and I would like you to recite one of them, please, so that we hear this.
Okay, let's go.
language.
Let's see. If I fail, you will not notice. So it's. First of all, I have to say something that she has, like, you know, you have like a lot of information and with like, no, and you cannot find anything about myself in English. So it's great, like the job that you have done, like so many things. You know more about me than myself. It's crazy. Okay.
Thank you.
So, a poem in Catalan. Yes, let's do it. Okay. Jo et diria, amiga meva, que no hi ha ni risc, ni mort, ni vida. Ni tampoc un altre astre on puguem desfer el camí i plantar de nou els plataners, plantar de nou les bugambílies, plantar de nou arrels molt fondes i fruits sucosos de vellut que facin els dies molt més amples i les nits molt més brillants. Però si no hi ha ni risc, ni mort, ni vida, ni tampoc un altre astre on desfer el camí i desaparèixer, ni un altre oceà on sucar el cos i no enfonsar-se. Escolta'm bé, que sols vull dir-te. Agafa fort aquest no viure i el seu arrossegar-se pels camins. Agafa'l fort i digues vine. Vine amb mi fins la fundària del glaçar, fins l'esvoranc del precipici, fins la punta d'aquell llamp, fins l'entrada del volcà. I quan siguem just en el límit, deixem-nos anar la mà. I did like 2 mistakes, but
We know
really,
nothing
really,
about it.
I'm not joking.
Thank you very much. This was beautiful. Now, could you tell us a bit about this poem? What did we just hear?
What does it say, like this poem?
Yeah, what is it? What is it about?
It's kind of a letter to a friend which says, do you want me to kind of translate it in English?
No.
Ah, okay. No, because I don't know if I'm able to do that. It says like, I would tell like this person who's writing, I guess it's me, says to a friend, I would tell you that if we don't have like another world to live in, let's leave this one. I mean, in a more beautiful way, you know, like this is very easy, but let's leave this one. And then it says, you have to get with you all these things that you don't like, and you have to come with me in different like edgy places. And it says like, until the end of the cliff, before the sea, next to the lighting, and before jumping, let's
Hold hands.
no, and hold hands.
Okay.
You know? Yeah. and
Let's
hold-
let go.
Something like that. It sounds
Okay.
horrible. I promise it's beautiful in Catalan. Yes?
No, it was
Okay.
beautiful.
Okay.
Okay, but now to go back to the novel Napalm in the Heart, it reminded me now of something that you said about this novel. So when we talk about dystopia, you said that usually people, when they think of dystopia, they think about, so it's like the end of the world, right? But that, the world without us. But then you twisted it, you turned it around and you said, well, but I wrote this novel to reflect on what to do when there is us, but we don't have the world anymore. I think that's a very interesting question that we don't ask ourselves at all.
Yeah, I think that we are obsessed when, like, you know, for me everything started when I was younger and like with like watching films like Mad Max, Black Mirror, you know, all this stuff, which it can be interesting somehow. I don't like it that much because I think that we are constantly being bombed by information which is telling us what is going to happen with the world when we are not here. And I think that a question that art or like literature itself can help us to answer is, what do we have to do with us if we don't have like this world to live in? And I think that literature, in a way, can create worlds when the real world is not being safe enough to live in, you know? So, and I say that not just because it's beautiful to say it. I say it because I really believe that. I mean, and we can go into a very like pragmatic sense if we say something that has always been said, that how many people have been saved by literature or by escaping from their worlds and discovering inner and different worlds through writing or through reading. I'm talking about that, but not just about that in a very individual sense, but like since I became a writer, whatever that is, I have discovered that what I do with my writing is as important as what I do with my books once they are published. So when I'm talking about creating new worlds and new kins between people, I'm also talking about what you do with your books and where you want to carry them, where you want to present them, where you want to talk about them with people. And I have had like so many beautiful experiences with my books, like meeting people, or not just, and also like experiences in which I was not involved, you know, like a lot of people who told me like, thanks to your book, I met this person, or thanks to your book, we created this literature group and we became friends, or like people who gave me the book to sign it for a lover, things like that. Mm-hmm. So I really believe that we can do like amazing, amazing things with literature. We just have to believe that we can do it, and then we will do it, I guess, yeah.
So since you've mentioned Lover, the excerpt that Nate's just read earlier was a letter, again, of the narrator to Boris, where he explained right after the great apocalyptical accident that happened at that mysterious factory where only women worked, which was also an interesting side to the story. But apart from that, so the narrator explained what happened. He was talking to Boris that lived on the other side of the forest or the mountain, and so it's an established relationship already in a way, but we feel, or at least I felt, that it was still in the making. At the same time, the narrator also, so the letter also mentioned his mother is, well, not exploring, but the book sort of is exploring also the relationship mother-son. Then we heard the letter talk about inheritance in a way, so grandfather, father. But I would like to focus here now on the topic of love, because the love or the relationship between Boris and the narrator is a bit unusual. In a way, it's erotic and only composed of desire in a way, but then on the other side it's full of tenderness, etc. You also are a PhD student in love and poetic. Why does the topic of love interest you so much? And could you talk a bit about how it's sort of reflected in the book?
Wow. Okay. I think for me, when I finished, you know, when I write the novel, I don't really know what I'm talking about. So then I finish the novel, and I read it, and it's like, okay, I wrote a story about this or about that. And when I finished Napalm, I had the feeling that I wrote a story about love between two guys, and a story of love between a mother and a son. Maybe the story of love between a mother and a son, for me, it was even more important than the other one.
Why?
Because I think it's a kind of love that we don't really talk about, and I think that when you don't, I mean, a lot of people love their mothers, okay? I guess. But I think that when you have a particular experience with love, which is not normative, which is not hegemonic, and which is painful, it has a lot to do with the love that your parents gave to you. Because during a long time, when you were not able to love the way you wanted, the only love that you had, or that you didn't have, were the love of your parents. So, for me, yeah, the stories of love inside a family are very important. Somehow you learn to love inside your family, and that's a tragedy. And it's also a very nice opportunity, depending on what happens inside, right? And yeah, I have the feeling that we all fell in love when we are very, very little with our mothers. I think that's our first love. Maybe I'm crazy to say that, but I think that we kind of fell in love with our mothers when we are very young, or with our fathers. I don't know, depending on each experience, right? So that was the question of why the mother, of the love of the mother. And so what I wanted to write during, like what I wanted to show, or what I wanted to write about, was like something that I like a lot about Zizek, when he says that love is evil. And
Okay, now I know why you posted his face yesterday on Instagram.
yes, because I have the intuition that I will find him in the grocery shop before leaving at some point.
It's very possible.
Maybe he's here, I don't know. I'm not a person who has, I'm not like a fan of people, but I think it's just funny that I can find, oh, okay, anyways. You know, like, Slovenia is a small country like Catalonia, so you don't have like a lot of very famous people, like Catalan people. We don't have a lot of famous people. Maybe the most important Catalan people that you know is who?
Cesc Fabregas.
A football player, or like, okay, that's okay. And also like the president who was in exile, maybe, right? So not very nice stories there. And from Slovenia, Zizek. And yesterday I discovered also Melania Trump, which is not better to find Zizek, I guess, right? Okay.
You won't find Melania here, no.
I won't?
No.
You never know, eh? No, so love is evil. And I like how he says that when he says love is evil, because love changes the way you see the world and you see oneself. And in this part, of course, he says it he explains it so much better. Now I'm starting to lose like my English. Okay, okay, let's focus. Too many times speaking in English now. Okay, so he says that love is evil in the sense that it shapes a different way to see the world and to see yourself. And in this particular sense, it's evil because you didn't want to change the way to see the world or to see yourself. But then love appears and it changes everything, you know? And he also says love is an encounter because it's something that you were not expecting, but then when you find it, you feel that you were waiting for that moment for a very long time. And then you decide to convert to this encounter, which was something that you were not searching for, into something that you want to be in, right? So I think the story of the two stories of love in this novel are about that, about evil and about encounter. You know, you don't choose your mother, but you have to choose if you want to love her or not. And that's a tough decision. And we all take this decision, maybe not in a very conscious way, but at some point we have to take this decision. And you will always, always, always think about that decision, because if it was a yes, it was a yes. But if it was a no, you are always going to be fleeing from your mother or from that love, right? So I think it's about that. And why I study like my PhD about love? Because that's a good question, you know? Because I'm studying, okay, that's my PhD project. Do you really want to know about that? Yes, like very fast.
Very fast.
Okay. So, no, come, let's go for
Okay.
another question, yeah.
Okay. So you spoke of love being evil, but now I want to talk about beauty being terrible, as said Baudelaire, because so the book is a book in prose, so it's a novel, but it still contains, as you said at the very beginning of our conversation, a lot of poetry that you could have written in verses, but you sort of transformed it into a novel. And the language there is very poetic. However, it is there's always this sense of tension and brutality somewhere under the surface, and every now and then you receive a punch in your face, right? With some very brutal scenes that perhaps one could expect, but not really when faced with them. So even despite of that, I personally find that the whole novel reflects, despite the brutality, also this big beauty. But what would you say to this, that Baudelaire said in the 19th century, that
Yes.
beauty has to be terrible also?
You have control of the time, right?
I do.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Okay, because I don't want these people to get bored of me talking. Okay, okay. So, I think in the sense I write it, it has a lot to do with my like personal point of view, which is not always like that. I write about things or I write things that I don't believe in. But in this case, there is like a link with my biography, I guess, or with my life, which is that for me, every time I have experienced beauty, there was always something or a little bit of terror. I don't know how to say it. It was always a little bit terrifying, maybe because it was something that I couldn't do, something that I couldn't live, something that I lived with guilt, I guess. I'm not talking just about love or sex. I'm talking about beauty. And also with terrifying situations, like, I don't know, maybe I'm romanticizing something and I shouldn't do it, but that's how I lived it, so I cannot change it. That for me, like, the worst moments of my life have been beautiful somehow. I don't know how to say it. Like, maybe because I was living them in a particular way, or maybe because I had the chance to move like a little bit farther from them when I was living them, thinking like in a creative or literary sense. I don't know if it makes sense, but when I say that literature can save us, or that literature has saved me, I say it in a very like really real sense, you know. So I think it has to do with how I have experienced those feelings or those situations, or yeah. Does it make sense? Kind of. No, not for you. That's
No.
the answer. I'm sorry.
No.
Oh.
It makes perfect sense.
Ah, okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. All good. All good. Now we're gonna invite Nate on stage for a second time, please.
Borisu sem rekel, naj zapre oči in si poskusi zamisliti, kakšno življenje bi si želel, če bi lahko sam odločal o tem. Rekel sem mu, ko sva se vozila pod stropom drevesnih krošenj, ne zapri oči, ker voziš, toda predstavljaj si, da imaš zaprte. Pretvarjal se je, da ima oči zaprte, priprl jih je, da je pod vekami ostala zgolj tenka bela režica. Ni govoril. Nato pa mi je rekel, nobena ideja mi ne pride na misel. Ugibam, da si je lahko zamislil le nekaj malenkosti, tako kot jaz. Da bi bila mama živa, da bi se lahko kadarkoli vrnil domov, da se to, da sva skupaj, ne bi nikoli končalo. In to je bilo bolj ali manj vse. Tudi sam sem poskusil. Močno sem stisnil veke, v sence sem osredotočil vso moč, da se mi je napela koža na vratu, vendar si nisem mogel zamisliti ničesar. Pojma nisem imel, kakšen svet bi si želel. Tako da mi je bilo nemogoče odgovoriti na vprašanje. Vse, kar sem imel, je bila tista mantra, ki sva si jo ponavljala na začetku, vendar sva si jo v nekem nedoločenem trenutku poti prenehala govoriti. Govorila je nekaj o bližini morja, o tem, da bi kupila kos zemlje in obdelovala vrt, imela domače živali, da bi se lahko kopala in se posušila na zraku. Ustaviva avto, ko nebo počrni, na ovinku, kjer se med robidovjem skriva odcep za stransko pot. Ko motor ugasne, slišiva tok reke, ki besno hrumi. Slišati je kot odprta pipa. Boris spusti okensko šipo, pomoli noge ven in se z glavo nasloni na naslonjalo sedeža. Jaz se presedem na zadnji sedež, da bi preveril mamo. Ko se dotaknem njenega prsnega koša, iz prsti iz navade poiščem utrip srca. Njeno telo mi razpada v dlaneh, kot bi grebel po vlažni gorski podrasti. Svilnati. S težavo jo prepoznam. Ko takole leži, pomislim na tedne po očetovi smrti, ko se ni ganila iz postelje. Nosil sem ji hrano, ker pa mi ni hotela videti, sem ji opuščal pred vrati. Nekaj ur pozneje sem šel po pladenj, pomil krožnik, zvečer pa sem ji pred vrata ponovno položil polnega. Nekaj mesecev za njo sploh nisem obstajal. Nato sem zasedel neki nov položaj v hišnem redu. Utelešal sem očetovo odsotnost. Prevzel sem njegovo pozicijo. Zdaj sem bil jaz tisti, ki je vzdrževal mamo. Predal sem se temu, česar nisem razumel. Najbolj mi je bilo hudo, da se nisem mogel odlepiti od nje, ker me je na njo vezala mešanica ljubezni in krivde. Ljubiti lastnega sovražnika. Kot zdaj, ko se mi zdi, da bi bila norost, da bi jo spustil po reki navzdol, pa čeprav mama ni zgolj telo, postala je ovira. Ničesar nisem čutil, ko sem vlekel njeno telo. Lahko bi ga nosil v naročju, kot bi šlo za truplo mačka, umazanega in raskavega mladička s togimi tačkami, iztegnjenimi kot stebrički. Stopal bi in ga nosil, ne da bi se spotikal. Po cesti in po blatu, tam, kjer bi pač moral hoditi. Zdelo se mi je, da ni težko. Ja. Čutil bi globoko olajšanje, razbremenjenost, red v sočasnem dihanju dežja, dreves in noči. To, kar se dogaja, je v redu, bi ponavljal. Ne bi bilo naključnih vezi, pa tudi sam ne bi bil. Oče na svojem mestu, dedek na svojem mestu, mama na svojem mestu. Muljasta potka okoli domače hiše, hrib, volkovi, nebo, vrt. Vse na svojem mestu. In mačka v mojem naročju. Vse bi bilo odvisno od mene in obenem bi bil jaz odvisen od vsega okoli sebe. Nič me ne bi skrbelo, ko bi hodil naokoli z izsušenim truplom živalce, oškropljenim z blatom, da bi mi bilo obenem hladno in toplo v prsih. Kot žrtveni dar. Ko vstaneva, so moje noge močne. Koža, ki mi prekriva roke, je na otip drugačna. Od spanja v avtu pa me boli hrbet. Preden se odpraviva, pokrijem mamo in ji zakrijem obraz. Dedek je, ko smo dobili pujske ali piščančke, imel navado reči, da je roditi se tako, kot bi utrgal rožo. Kajti v trenutku, ko jo odtrgaš, začne umirati. Kljub temu, da je videti polna življenja. Ni pa povedal, kako toga postane roža, ko umre, kako uveni, ter kako hitro začne gniti in se spremeni v gnojilo. Ljubiti, nasprotno, je recitiral, pa pomeni opazovati rožo, ne da bi jo utrgal in izpulil korenine. Gledati jo in se je naužiti, ne da bi se je dotaknil. Poslušal sem ga in si to, kar je govoril, ponavljal v svoji glavi. Toda le kje je on vedel o rožah? On, ki je polovico svojega življenja mislil, da je v napoto. Jaz pa takrat nisem videl rek mravelj, ki so se vzpenjale in spuščale po steblih, kot bi bila ta avenije in nosile uši ter jih odlagale na popkih in nežnih koreninicah. In uši so jim sesale kri. In že ko so se razprli, so bili tisti maloštevilni cvetovi uveli, čeprav so bili živi. Mravlje pa so še naprej lezle gor in dol. In ko so bile drobne žuželke tako site cvetličnega soka, da so se kar cedile od nektarja, so jih posmukale z vejic in jih odnesle v svoje rove, kjer so jih pojedle. Zagledam se v materine oči in ji pokrijem obraz. Ne glede na vse, si ponavljam, napake so vrata do novih spoznanj. In vem, da to ni res. Ko sobo z njihovega sedeža pogledam Borisa, da bi ga prosil, da bi se obrnila in se vrnila domov. Vendar mu tega ne rečem. In on še naprej vozi z roko na menjalniku, ne da bi se premikal, kot bi ga nekaj motilo. Nekaj nepotrpežljivega je na njegovi negibni in nemi pojavi. Čeprav ve, da obstaja neka beseda, ki sem jo odločil zamolčati. Spomnim se obritoglavca, vsake toliko. Vtis, ki ga je naredil name. Kot bi se od nekdaj zavedal in bil o tem prepričan, da ga bom prej ali slej premagal. Potopim se v njegov pogled tistega jutra, zdaj od tega že tako dolgo, in opazujem skozi njegove oči gost na neki nov način, kot bi mi v nekem trenutku vse postalo jasno. Iti naprej je vedno tudi zapuščanje. Pogledam Borisa, vrat nagne v eno in nato v drugo stran, da si popoka kosti v vratu in vozi naprej. Še en tunel. Tako dolg je, da ne veva, koliko je ura, ko pripeljeva iz njega. Ali je ta oranžna svetloba, ki se odbija od bleščeče karoserije, sončni zahod ali vzhod novega dne.
Hvala, Nate. So Nate has just read one of the final parts of the book when they are leaving with the narrator's mother's corpse. And I think that since it was one of the last parts of the book, and you once said that when you're writing, you don't really think of the readers, but you discover them once your book is out. Now, the readers, the future readers of your book here have had some chance to get to know your writing or get to know you a bit through our conversation. And I would like to invite you, if you have one or two, up to 3 short questions to ask Paul before we conclude the conversation. Okay, if there's no questions, then,
Hello. Since you said that writing in Catalan is a political choice, not only a political choice, but also a political choice, I wondered how you feel about translations of your work into Castilian.
Good question. In fact, not a lot of Catalan writers are translated into other languages, but it is not usual for a Catalan writer to be translated into Spanish. I wouldn't know like how many, but a lot of Catalan writers are not translated, which, I just want to say that it's not something that it's usual, that every single book which is written in Catalan is translated into Spanish. This doesn't happen. And when it happens, well, you can deal with the situation in different ways. For example, you can choose if you want the translation to be published at the same time as the original one. If you choose this thing, which what happens is that, or what can happen is that the Spanish translation kind of eats the original one, right? Because people who might buy the book in Catalan are not going to do it because they have the Spanish option. So, for example, with my translations, I always wait a lot for the Spanish translation to be in the bookshop, which maybe it's not the best commercial idea or marketing idea, but I think it makes sense to a way to understand literature. And this on the one hand. On the other hand, for me, it's something beautiful in the sense that for, like, as I said, for a Catalan writer to be translated is something super difficult. And if that happens, that means that people from Argentina are going to read me, or people from Madrid, or people from Andalusia, I don't know. So for me, it's a joy because it's like more people will be able to read that story. So in that sense, it's something good. It's something nice. It's something that I celebrate a lot, and I'm happy about it. But I think it's important to deal with this situation in a very conscious way. I don't know if it makes sense what I said. Yeah.
Še kdo?
I guess it's difficult to ask questions about a book that they haven't read, right? So
But anyway, I have a couple more questions. The novel Napalm in the Heart was just adapted, if I'm not mistaken, in January into a theater play. It was a debut for a student director. How did that come about? And is it true that there's also going to be a movie adaptation?
Have you seen that she knows everything? Crazy. Yes. So they did an adaptation for theater, which for me it was like, wow, shocking, you know, because when you're writing, you really have like your own like pictures or your own like colors of the novel, you know. And I don't think it's the best novel to put it in theater. To put it in movie, yes, because there is a lot of like landscape and a lot of feeling. So I think it's easier to put it in cinema. But to adapt it in theater, for me, it was something like, wow, do you really want to go there? And they did it. And it was beautiful and very interesting to see how like one story can be seen from so many different points of languages, from so many languages. And the theater at the end is another language, right? So it was beautiful to see how like the novel was transformed, like it was shaped from this other point of view. And film, they are doing it right now. So I don't know anything. I just know that they are writing the script. I have nothing to do with the project. And they are doing it, and I am excited. I was very excited to see that. Like, is it going to be like that? I hope so, yes. So, I mean, yes, I don't know what to say. I'm happy. Yes.
And also recently, you've already released your second novel. Could you tell a bit about it, just
Yes.
real quick?
So I published my second novel last month in Catalonia, and it's going to be out in Spanish in June, so 6 months later.
What's the title? I don't know how to pronounce it.
Okay, the title is super long. It's called
I just remember Crema.
Crema, yes. Oferta a les mans al paradís crema, which means, okay, it will be something like, I don't know how they are going to translate it into English, but it's like offered in your hands, paradise burns. Yes, so that's the title. And it is a story about friendship, about two friends, one guy and one girl, because after Napalm I was kind of tired of writing about love, you know, love all the time, love, love, love. And also my PhD, love all the time. I was like, come on. And I was tired. And I said, let's write about friendship, which is a way of loving.
Which is also love.
Which is also love. But yes, but maybe a kind of love that we don't know so many things about it, or that we don't have like so many ideas about it, about what friends do, what do we expect of our friends, what friends cannot do, what happens when friends just separate. So I was trying to explore this, and this is why I wrote this second novel. Yes.
But it also explores the topic of AIDS.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
How can you?
Well, there is a relationship between this and what I was saying before, that for me, literature is a way also to, I mean, it makes no sense for me what some people say, that we can only write about things that we have lived. It makes no sense. In fact, fiction is about writing things that you haven't lived. And of course, you have to be careful how you do that, and to be conscious that if you are talking from other points of view, you have to take so many things into account. That's true. So the question about AIDS was like, the main question was for me, how is a pandemic that I haven't lived affecting my way of loving or being in the world nowadays? Not just me, but for a lot of people. So that was the question. And it's also then a book about memory, about loss, about trying to understand which of the things that are part of us are really part of us, or are just memories. And in which sense memories and the stories that they have told you are not just memories, are also realities, right? So yeah, that's it.
And so in the third book that you are writing now, but you said before, when we talked before the event, that you will write about yourself in a more direct way.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, I mean, yes. She knows that because I told her. No, because if not, it's like,
Yeah,
she in my mind.
You cannot find that
Yes.
on Google. No.
Yes, I'm starting, I was like, okay, I wrote 2 works of fiction, and now I want to see what happens if I write about, not about myself, because it's not really about myself. I mean, it's not that I don't want to tell more, it's that I don't really know what to tell, because as I told you, when I write, I don't plan, so I'm kind of exploring. But I'm trying to depart from a point where it's more biographical somehow, I guess. Yes.
So when you said that there your role model is Didier Ribon and his return to Reims.
Yes. I love Didier Ribon because I think he does something great, which is talking about himself. It's what we said before about particular and universal things, you know. He talks about himself, but because he knows that his experience is beautiful and terrifying at the same time. And he knows that talking about his life, I mean, maybe he didn't know that when he was writing that novel, but what he does is that he writes about his life and is writing about so many lives. And I would love to do something like that. I don't know if I will be able to. I will try, I guess.
Well, we all wish you good luck, and we hope
Thank
to
you
read your
very
second
much.
and third book also in
Thank you.
Slovenian. Thank you very much,
Thank
Paul.
you, Nina, for your interview.
It was a pleasure talking to you, and I would like to conclude now with a quote of yours. So it's something that you wrote when the prominent publishing house Faber acquired world English rights for Napalm in the Heart. You said something not terrifying, but just beautiful. It was the best thing that can happen to a book is for it to be read. That's another way of saying to be loved.
Yes.
So it's an invitation to read and to love. Hvala lepa vsem in lep večer. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much.